Sorry in advance for my shit-ass writing. I am horrible at writing stories, but some crazy stuff went down, so I must share. So, a few nights ago I received a call from a buddy of mine asking if I could give him a ride to an event, then pick him up an hour or so later. I didn't have much to do that night, and he offered me $40, so I obliged. Around 8 p.m., my friend and I were in a car and on the way to said event. That night, it was pouring rain, and there was a ton of traffic because of the event, so I had to pay extra attention to the road. 8:30, we pull up to the place. My buddy gets out, and I drive on. Now, the place I took him was about 30 minutes away from my house, so it made more sense to stay in the area rather than driving all the way home, then all the way back. I turned on my music and started driving around looking for a place to park my car and chill out. I was in a brand new luxury car, which had a sweet sound system with Bluetooth that I could hook up to. I did not want to wreck trying to connect it, so I pulled off into a vacant gas station so I could get everything connected. This is where I went wrong, because not only had I entered a vacant lot at night, but I was in a bad area, and I was all by myself. Being oblivious as I sometimes am, I didn't realize the dangerous situation I was putting myself in. So, la-di-da-da, I'm sitting there connecting the Bluetooth, when for whatever reason, I decide to look up. As I glanced up, I see an old white BMW pull into the parking lot rather quickly, then stop in the middle of the parking lot directly in front of me. 2 black males and 1 white female. Weird. My guard was up now, but I wait to see what they do. Then all of a sudden, the black dude in the passenger seat flings his door open, and I shit you not, starts running at my car. Oh shit, I thought to myself. The look this man gave me was fucking horrifying. I can only explain it as a look you would give someone that you have 100% intent to kill. My heart dropped, and so did my foot, onto the gas pedal. I pulled out of the parking lot and into the far lane of the street. I glanced back briefly and saw that the dude, and now the female too, were running towards my car, which I had stopped at the stoplight. So I hit the gas again and get the fuck out of there, weaving through back roads, running red lights, and finally making my way to the highway. I'm pretty sure this group saw me sitting all alone in the gas station parking lot in a $100,000 car and saw me as a easy carjacking. Thank God I noticed them before they were able to pull me out of my car and do God knows what to me before pulling off in my car. For a couple of minutes I was kinda shaken up, mainly because I thought that they may have tried to follow me, but then I cooled down and just learned from what happened. I also called my father and asked him if he would get me a handgun. So strangers from that close down marathon, let's not meet again.
Long-time lurker here, and I always contemplated telling my story. I feel like I'm finally ready to revisit that time in my life. Maybe that is because my mother finally forgave herself. I was 10 years old, just started 5th grade. I made a new friend in school, Janie. My parents allowed me to go for a sleepover at her house. My mom and dad were pretty laid back because I was their last kid. My sisters were 9 to 13 years older than me. So my mom dropped me off, said hello to Janie's mom, and left. Me and Janie started playing karaoke when her mom decided she was going to leave. She said goodbye to us, gave us kisses on the cheek, and I remember thinking she smelled like black licorice. Me and Janie were left to do whatever we wanted for the next 5 hours. Janie's older sister came home at around 1 a.m. and told us that we should go to bed because we were falling asleep on the couch. So we went into Janie's room and laid in her bed. Later that night, I can't be sure what time because it was pitch black, Janie's mom came home. I woke up to a pounding sound on Janie's bedroom door. I started yelling in fear when I felt a hand over my mouth. It was Janie telling me to be quiet and pretend to be asleep. But at that moment, it was too late. Her mom had kicked the door open, stormed over to the bed and grabbed Janie's face. She began screaming at Janie because we accidentally left the TV on. I was trying to hide under the covers, but she saw me. She began slamming her fist on the bed around me and screamed, "You think you are better than me?" over and over. I was sobbing and all I could think about was going home. I was so scared and I begged her mom to let me call my parents because I felt sick. Her mom grabbed my chin, looked me in the eyes and said, "I know what you're doing, little girl, and you aren't going anywhere until I say you can." She stormed out of the room, slamming the half-broken bedroom door behind her. Janie said nothing, and neither did I. Needless to say, I did not sleep that night. In the morning, when I went to call my mom, Janie's mom was on the phone. She wouldn't let me use it, even though I asked multiple times. Finally, she was going to take a shower and I heard her pass the phone off to Janie's sister and say, "Don't let that little bitch use this phone. If you do, I ain't buying you cigarettes anymore." I was a sheltered kid at the time, but when I overheard that, I knew I had to get out of there. I approached Janie's sister and she basically threw the phone at me. She was ready to give it to me before I asked for it. With a look of fear in her eyes, she said, "My mom is calling her guy, so you need to call your home, now." And so I did. She saved my life, and I still believe that to this day, was her guy someone who was going to get rid of me? I shudder at the thought. The rest of the story isn't very exciting. My mom picked me up. I acted like nothing was wrong. 2 days later, it was Parents' Day in school. Janie was in my class, which meant her mom was there. Her mom approached me and asked me why I never wanted to come over anymore and accused me of being a mean girl. She talked to me in a way that seemed harmless, therefore it wasn't obvious to my mom or my teacher. I kept my mouth shut and didn't say a word. Well, until 2 weeks later, my older sister was babysitting me while our parents were at the movies, and I broke down and told her what happened because I couldn't stop thinking about it. She comforted me and told my parents. We hugged each other and we cried. A couple of weeks later, Janie stopped coming to school. My classmates wondered what happened, and so did I. I didn't want to ask my parents what happened. 15 years later, I heard from Janie on Facebook. There was no life-changing conversation, but we exchanged pleasantries. That's life sometimes. So, crazy alcoholic abusive mother, let's never meet again.
This literally just happened, and it gave my boyfriend a panic attack when he found out what happened. My entire life, starting from when I was about 7 all the way up to now, has been a let's not meet diary. Today, I went shopping for some food and hygiene stuff. I was in the fruit aisle and I was approached by a bloke that looked similar to the black version of Fat Bastard from Austin Powers, if you can bring yourself to imagine that. He introduced himself by saying, "Can I have your number, baby? I wanna hit that pussy up." And I responded by showing him my engagement ring and saying that I had a partner and I wasn't interested. I'd been polite to him despite how he spoke to me. He then says, "Well, he's not here now, so what can he do? As far as I'm concerned, you're alone." At this point, I'm getting sick of it and quite frightened of the prospect of being alone with this man because the supermarket was quiet, so I sped up and became erratic in my decisions about which aisle to go down next. I raced like a lunatic to the tills and went to a male cashier. The creep was nowhere to be seen. I thought that he'd gotten bored. As I walked to the exit, I saw him out of the corner of my eye and decided to call my partner. He picks up quickly, and I put him on speaker, asking him to put the kettle on because I'm nearly home. I did this in the hope that the creep would hear his voice and know that my partner was home and that I'm near home. It didn't work, so I took to Plan B. Plan B was simply to run home as quickly as possible, but it wasn't that easy because I had a lot of main roads to cross. I legged it up to the first set of lights, but they were red, so I couldn't cross. The cars move at 40 miles per hour on that road, so it would have been stupid to try. I'm thinking, shit, he's right on me. He was 10 feet away from me, and the lights turned green, so I ran and kept running until I saw a side street I was familiar with. I know running down a side street wasn't a bright idea, but neither was waiting on the main roads for him to catch up to me and then have no doubt where my boyfriend's house is. I can't explain the decision I made because it wasn't logical. It was intuitive. Through reading The Gift of Fear, I've learned to listen to my intuition's smallest hints and trust them. I was running for 5 minutes straight before I made it home and fell into my partner's arms, babbling, trying to tell him what happened. I'm considering reporting this to the police, just in case this guy tries to shit on a more vulnerable young woman who might not be as physically able as me. Although I've had a lot of creepy and frightening experiences, this is definitely in my top 10 because of how isolated I could have been had I made different decisions about how I was going to get home. It goes without saying that I never want to meet this person again.
So, gay male here. I was thinking back to early me after just coming out, and I shudder to think of the way I let creeps take advantage of me. One particular encounter really stuck out to me, so I figured I'd post it here. So, picture an 18-year-old, blonde, skinny, cute twink who had just come out of the closet and suffered from massive self-esteem issues. That's me. Perfect bait for all assortments of creepy gay men ready to act out their fantasies. I got hit up a lot on places like Grindr to act like I was anywhere between the ages of 12 to 16, since I looked like I was around 15 at most. I started chatting with this one guy who seemed relatively cute named Jack, and the first conversation quickly moved off Tinder onto text messaging, then phone conversations. Honestly, looking back, so many red flags were there. Every conversation was turned back to how awesome he was, how wealthy he was, how much he worked out. Our first phone conversation, he started out by subtly putting down every accomplishment I listed about myself, or trying to one-up me. I ended up getting pretty sick around the time I started talking to him. Just a flu, but it meant that we weren't able to meet up for like the first week of us talking, and I could tell he was getting frustrated. After like 3 days of talking, we haven't even met yet. He asked to be my boyfriend. I, having massive self-esteem issues and being unable to tell anyone no for the life of me, said sure. He immediately followed with, good, because as boyfriends, when we have sex for the first time, that means I don't have to use protection, and you're going to be bottom, of course. I had never bottomed at this point, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the ins and outs of gay sex, is usually something that takes a lot of trust and preparation. Going without protection for the first time meeting someone, without either of you getting tested beforehand, is a big no-no, considering how prevalent STDs are amongst gay men. I remember stopping him in the phone conversation to blurt out that I didn't feel comfortable having unprotected sex the first time I met him, without both parties getting tested first. And he said something along the lines of, I'm your boyfriend though, don't you love me? God, looking back, I just want to slap my 18-year-old self. I was so freaking timid. Instead of arguing this obvious manipulation, I said, well, we'll at least use lube, right? Again, for most of you that don't know the ins and outs of gay sex, lubricant is usually a must-have for anal. The anus doesn't naturally lubricate like the vagina does, so going in completely dry really fucking hurts the bottom. He chuckled and told me I'd be able to handle it, using lube sucked for the top. It's like a slip and slide, not pleasurable at all. This correspondence continued until the day of our meetup in a hotel room that he had purchased. And for a few hours before meeting up, I finally snapped to my senses. I realized that I had been contemplating all the excuses I could give to avoid meeting up with my boyfriend, who obviously only used that line to try to convince me to have rough, unlubricated, unprotected sex with him for the first time meeting him. It was obviously just a hookup, and the only reason he had to try to pressure me into saying boyfriend was because I told him in our early messages that I was saving sex for a committed relationship. I texted him that I was uncomfortable with having sex, felt pressured into doing things that I wasn't okay with, but was still open to meet up for a dinner or coffee and dating before committing to anything super serious. He responded by telling me to go fuck myself, and that you're just like all gay twinks fresh out of the closet, selfish, and you only want to play games and use other men. I quickly blocked him. That was the end of that. I'm really glad that younger me snapped into my senses. I know that if I had entered that situation, it wouldn't have turned out pretty for me. He would have ended up really hurting me, and I highly doubt he would have listened to any pleas to stop. Luckily now, almost 4 years later, I'm in a happy, committed relationship with a wonderful man whom I share an apartment with, a corgi, and lots of great cuddles, and who actually likes cooking for me. Prince Charming exists after all.
I'm quite a loner, and I like to go on walks just to get some me time. So this one night on the 27th of November, I decided that I was going on another lengthy walk of mine. There was something eerie this time though, as I had the feeling that the 27th of November is a night that something grotesque was going to happen, and turns out I was right. So at around 2 a.m. I was restless and I made my way into the cold night with the same feeling of dread I had earlier on that day. The first hour of my walk was pretty normal and nothing out of the ordinary happened. But lo and behold, I had the feeling that I was being watched. Bearing in mind it was now 3 a.m., I was now sitting on a bench that was in a park that wasn't very well lit. Someone else being in the park was very unlikely, as it was a small town, and the only people who would be around at this time were drunk pissheads. Anyways, there was no sound, and I caught a dark figure out of the corner of my eye. It was just standing there in my direction. I turned on the flashlight that was on my phone and pointed my light towards the dark figure, but to my surprise, he had vanished into thin air. Me just being paranoid and extremely tired, I just ignored the weird encounter and decided it would be best to make my way home and get some shut-eye. Placing my phone back in my pocket and lighting up another cigarette, I made my way back to my house, but still I had this uneasy feeling that someone was watching me. I usually don't scare easily, but this felt different, like someone had decided to taunt me. I looked behind me to see the same dark figure standing right beside a tree just looking my way. Now I know this isn't just something in my mind. I shouted to the figure, "Hey man, is there a problem?" You could hear the fear in my voice, but I wasn't going to let this creep get the best of me. There was no response from him. This was just getting weird now. I stood there and my eyes widened. The man then got on all fours and started crawling towards me in a manner I can only describe as insane. The only thing I could hear was this hissing noise, which I presume was coming from him. I just stood there wondering what on earth he was going to do to me. As he edged closer to me, I noticed something dangling off of him like a rucksack. It was some sort of dead bird or a small creature. Anyways, I didn't want to hang around to find out, so I dashed up a small lane right back to my house. Looking back on the ordeal, maybe I shouldn't have headed straight back home, as he would know where I lived. But my head was just in a messed up place from all the fear this man had caused me. I ran through my gate to my front door and quickly glanced behind me to see him standing outside my closed gate. One thing the man said to me will always send chills down my spine to this day. He muttered the words, "One day we will meet again, and this time you will be coming home with me." The events of this night stopped me from going on walks ever again, because even to this day, 5 years later, I'm still haunted by the fear that he will come back and take me to some sinister place where he will do whatever the hell he wants to me.
I used to go to college in downtown Chicago. I'd ride the L train from the Loop to take Lakeview twice a day for school. The train I took was the Brown Line, at the time known as one of the safest, less sketchy lines. But the creepiest thing that happened to me in my time in Chicago just so happened to occur on that very train line. So I was sitting on the train where the seats are faced outward, when you're near the doors and facing directly towards the seats across from you. I was facing this younger looking guy. He started making small talk with me, and I assumed he was a student. We were talking about classes and such until I noticed something in his eyes changed. I still couldn't put my finger on exactly what changed, but it put me on high alert. A few seconds later, he pulled his backpack off of his lap, and I noticed he was masturbating while speaking to me and staring at me. This was the middle of the day, around 3 p.m. I freaked the hell out and shot up and went to the other side of the train. Luckily, we were just getting to a stop, and I hopped off and waited for the next train. So, creepy middle of the day masturbator, let's not meet.
I'm telling this story now, while it's still really fresh in my memory. I work in healthcare. I sleep at work 5 nights a week, do a 16-hour day 5 days a week, and then have 2 days off, which are alternate weekends. I've got pretty used to sleeping in random places, and in tiny little offices on fold-out beds. I'm quite a paranoid person, but have slowly but surely managed to shake the feeling of fear and dread when sleeping somewhere unfamiliar. It's done my mental state some good, really. I did a sleep shift at the new unit the other night. It was one with 3 very independent clients, and it was a nice, easy shift. I went to bed at 10 p.m., watched some TV, and then awoke at 7 a.m. to unlock the doors, administer medication, and have a coffee. I stayed and did the day shift there, as someone had called in, and I left at 10 p.m. that night. It was a lovely day, with no behaviors or emergencies. When I left, I had to exit out through the car park, down a road, and to my car, which was parked on the next street. As I was leaving the building and doing a handover with the next sleep staff, a black BMW pulled up outside the car park. I literally thought nothing of it, as I knew it'd either be staff or someone picking up a member of staff. I walked out of the car park, and as I was walking out of the entrance to it, I looked towards the car, and the driver was exiting the vehicle. I noticed because the interior lights came on, and it caught my attention. I carried on walking down the street and heard the car door shut. I looked behind me and saw the guy walking directly behind me. I couldn't think of any reasonable excuse as to why he'd be following me, so I grabbed the only thing I had, a pen, and gripped it in my hand. I felt him grab my shoulder. I spun around and stabbed him in the cheek with the pen. He swept my hand away and said something along the lines of, "You gonna stab me with a pen?" and grabbed my face, hand across my mouth. I just wiggled and thrashed until he lost his grip on me. As soon as he did, I ran to my car and locked myself in, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't control the clutch because my legs were shaking so much, and I just kept stalling the car. He was stood on the passenger side, staring through the window, kind of smirking at me. I just sat there, totally frozen, and he shouted through the window, "I'll be here Sunday. You got family? You got kids? Watch." And then ran back to his car. I probably sat there for 20 minutes before I could drive home. I can distinctly remember his face and how much he was enjoying the fear he was causing. His smile. That's something I don't think I'll ever forget. I drove around in circles and zigzags for 40 minutes before going home, totally afraid that he was following me and would know where I lived. I eventually got home, locked all my doors and windows, and turned all the lights off. I don't think I've ever been that scared. I checked my rotation, and sure enough, I was due back at the building on the Sunday coming up. I have no idea how he knew, or who he was. All I could gather was that he was a Middle Eastern man, probably in his 30s. So, Middle Eastern man in his 30s. Let's not meet again.
So on Monday, I decided to participate in the blood drive at my church. It was my first time giving blood, so after I was done and going out to my car, I was pretty lightheaded. As I was about to get in my car, this guy in a red car pulls up. He was trying to get my attention, and I didn't want to seem like a dick, so I walked up to him. It's not like I had much of a choice anyways, since his car was blocking mine from pulling out. The only way I know how to describe him is that he kind of looked like the guy who shot Uncle Ben in the first Spider-Man movie. He told me that he was out looking for his daughter, and he was low on gas because he had been driving all day. I of course didn't believe him at all. I haven't seen very many drug addicts or junkie in my life, but I could definitely tell he was one. He felt the need to show me his ID, which made it even more suspicious in my opinion. I was extremely lightheaded from giving blood just minutes ago, so I did what I think any smart person would do and pretended to believe him. I gave him all the money in my wallet, which was about $30, which was more than enough to give him a full tank of gas. I was hoping that would be enough to make him drive away, and thankfully it was. That event happened to me yesterday, so it was kind of still stuck in the back of my mind all day today. So about 2 hours ago, I got off work and noticed my gas tank was pretty low, so I was going to get gas on my way home from work. When I got to the gas station, it was about 10:30 at night. I was about to take out my debit card when this red car pulled up to the pump next to me. A few seconds later, the same fucking guy got out of the car. I glanced over and noticed that this time he had another guy with him. I tried to stay unnoticed, which I know was dumb since we were the only two people at the gas station. Of course it didn't work because he instantly recognized me and started talking to me again. He thanked me for yesterday and I was hoping that would be all he would say. But of course it didn't take long for him to get to the point that he wanted more money. He pulled the exact same shit. He pointed to the light on his car that said low fuel. The same one he showed me yesterday. But tell me, how the hell does somebody use an entire tank of gas in less than a day? He pulled out his wallet again and showed me his ID, but I was too frozen in the moment to even bother to look at it. He started saying that his daughter was on her way to the gas station too, and she'd be there in about 20 minutes. There was no way in hell I was going to wait there for whatever would be coming in 20 minutes, because I knew damn well it wouldn't be his daughter. But at the same time, I couldn't just leave, because I knew he would just get in his car and follow me. And having this bastard know where I live is the last thing I wanted. I pulled the, "I can't wait that long, I have school in the morning" card. That just happened to be the perfect thing to say because what happened next couldn't have gone more perfect. He told me that if I gave him $15 for his daughter's gas, it would be fine. I told him I could go to the ATM in the parking lot down the street while he filled his car with gas. So I put my card into the gas pump and paid for his gas. I made sure he had the pump in his car before I got into my car and hurried home as fast as I possibly could. Luckily it was late, so I didn't have to worry about other cars on the road. I got inside as fast as I could and locked every door in my house. I'm still checking outside the window every 15 minutes or so just to make sure there isn't a red car outside. So creepy guy in red car, let's not meet again, please.
Summer was at an end, and my school was having a planning day, so I stayed home with my older sister. She had a terrible cold with a high fever and an ugly cough. It worried me, so I called my mom on her lunch break and asked her what to do. She wouldn't be off work until 8 in the evening, since she had a meeting right after, so she told me to go to the drugstore and buy some cough medicine and something for the fever. Even though I'm very lazy, I agreed. I just wanted my sister to feel better. I live in the north side of Norway, so it didn't take long before it got dark out. It also rained like cats and dogs outside, and it had been like that for many days, so it was pretty cold out. I thought to myself that I wouldn't be surprised if I caught a cold as well from this damn weather, but I sucked it up, put on my raincoat and boots, and went out in the rain. The drugstore is about 10 minutes away from my house by foot, which I used 15. I liked to walk slowly back then. Not anymore. I got to the drugstore and bought the stuff I needed without any problems, only the woman cashier was a bit chatty. I'm not a chatty person and I hate small talk, so it was kind of awkward. I eventually got out of there and began to walk home. I was about halfway there when I noticed a car coming up behind me, very slowly. I could hear the sharp sound of the brakes as it slowed down until it was just rolling beside me. I was already cold, but this made me freezing. The car was dark grayish with dimmed windows. It looked expensive enough to make my car-crazed sister drool, but I was too scared to care. I just kept walking with the car rolling beside me. The front window closest to me on the passenger side slowly rolled down, and I turned to see a guy in his 20s flashing a smile. I could barely see the driver and 2 others in the back, all guys. It made me want to puke. I quickly looked away. "Hey, sweetie, where are you headed? Need a lift?" His voice made me want to cry. His tone was so sweet and taunting. He wanted to hurt me. I just knew it. "What you got in the bag?" he asked. I could see his hand in my peripheral vision reaching out of the car and pointing at my bag. That's when I saw it, something shiny and sharp in the driver's hand. I didn't even think. I just ran. There was a neighborhood on the opposite side of the road, so I ran past the front of the car, over the road and into someone's back garden. It was a miracle I didn't get hit, and that they were too shocked to speed up, but they soon snapped out of it. I could hear loud cussing in the background and the car stopping, then the door slamming shut. I tucked my bag under my coat so it wouldn't make any noise as I kept running. I didn't think of knocking at any doors because I knew they would get me before anyone could open. I ran zigzags between the houses for them to lose sight of me and looked for somewhere to hide. It worked. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were still after me. I spotted a huge bushy area at a ditch that was pretty steep. I went for it, slid down there like a fucking pro and crawled inside the biggest, thickest bush I could find. Then I waited. It didn't take long for them to show up. I could see their shoes as they paced around me. "You let that bitch go!" They stood right beside my hiding place. I had to bite down on my coat to stop myself from screaming. How could I know she was crazy enough to run like that? I recognized the voice as the one talking to me in the car. "She's fucking fast for being so fat. Shut up. Search over there." They looked everywhere. They even searched through the bush right next to me. I could barely breathe and my heart beat so hard and fast. I was afraid they would hear it. But they finally gave up after what felt like hours and cussed and yelled some more before they left. I waited there, listening for probably an hour before getting out of my hiding spot and knocking on the first house I saw. The couple living there were so kind to let me stay there and wait for my mom to pick me up after I called her and told her what happened. When we got home, my sister was waiting for us, angry that I took so long. I had to laugh. I never saw that car again, and I never called the police. Since this is Norway and this area is so quiet, they couldn't do anything else other than write a report about it in a file then throw it away. They needed proof and a name. I couldn't remember their faces, so it was useless. My mom warned the people she knew about the dark grayish car with dimmed windows. Nothing more could be done. I just had to cope and get over it. By the way, now you know fat chicks can run too, even from 4 guys with knives. How's that for a stereotype?
Six months ago, we moved into a new house. We had outgrown our old place, and this new house was perfect. Now, in hindsight, I should have known something was off. The rent was low, the neighborhood was perfect, and it just was too picturesque. But we were in need of a blessing at this time. And so in my mind and my family's mind, this house was a blessing to us. The day we were moving our stuff in, the guy next door came over for a chat. And during small talk, he kind of slid in the fact that no one had been able to stay in the house for more than a year. Also, that everyone who had once lived in the house left in the middle of the night. Now, before your mind begins to wonder, yes, absolutely, I found this information to be disturbing. But like I said, this house was a dream for us. I wasn't going to let the creepy neighbor scare me away. Things went well for us for about the first 6 months. The wife and kids were happy, and so was I. As a hobby, I played in a beer pong league. I've been doing this for about 10-15 years, along with my best friend Ron. Well, suddenly, Ron fell on some hard times. Problems on the job, problems at home with his wife, and he found himself in trouble. So my wife and I opened up our home to him, for a small fee, of course. Doc Waters, remember I was telling you about some of the strange occurrences in my house? After Ron moved in, all the strange shit started happening. Now, it would take a while before I experienced anything myself. But when I did, it was small stuff, like footsteps in the hallways, doors opening and closing on their own. However, Ron? Man, he was having issues. And it seemed like all the activity was focused on him. One morning, when my wife and I went downstairs for breakfast, we found him in the corner of the living room, knees hugged to his chest, his eyes wide open and his blank stare and shaking. It took nearly 2 hours to get him to talk. And when he did, what he said was enough to get my wife and I to start praying again. You see, Ron had been lying on the sofa watching TV. And as he began to doze off, for some reason, something made him open his eyes. And when he did, there was this figure standing over him. It was jet black, and his head reached the ceiling of the room. And the eyes, they were this fiery red color. This shadow creature was solid black, and it was looking away from him. Ron told me that initially he thought he was dreaming, so he began to wipe his eyes. And as he removed his fingers from his eyes, that's when it looked down at him. And he heard it say,
"What do you know about death?"
Now, of course, I thought my guy Ron was tripping, but he insisted that this sound was not in his head and that this thing stood there looking down at him. Ron closed his eyes again, praying there was nothing more than a dream. And then when he opened them, it was bent over, face to face with him. That's when he rolled over on his stomach, pushed his face into the sofa, and began to pray. A few minutes later, he rolled back over. There was nothing there, but he could feel this presence in the room. So he moved to the corner, put his back against the wall. And that's how my wife and I found him the next morning. Knees to his chest, eyes wide open, with the sickest look of fright and fear in his eyes that I'd ever seen. After that night, my wife and I helped Ron get an apartment and moved him out of our house. And since he's been gone, the activity has stopped.